Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Commission Breath. Brandon Love here for a solo episode. And for those of you who don't know me that well, I used to, prior to mortgaging, do a bunch of different businesses. 99% of them were complete and utter failures. But the last big project I did before jumping into the mortgage business was that I ran a small farm. It was like a market garden kind of thing. I distributed to farmers markets, to local grocery stores and restaurants in the GTA area. So kind of Milton and Hamilton area all the way to Toronto restaurants for distribution. So it was a ton of work. It was a passion project I started and I thought this is going to be the thing for me. Ultimately it wasn't. It was the fastest and the best way to lose money, get really stressed out, but have some fun in the meantime. So there was parts of it I loved, but overall it wasn't the right business for me. And I'm super happy I found mortgages because this feels like a way better fit. With farming, it's kind of one of those things where you say, well, that's totally different world. But there were some key takeaways from there that I've been reflecting on recently, working in my own backyard garden and my cottage property. And I just wanted to highlight some of those today because I think they're useful and helpful to apply to your mortgage business, especially if you're in a position right now where you want to be growing but maybe aren't seeing the growth at the speed that you would like. So, kicking things off, the first big thing to recognize and realize that in both farming and mortgages, the day you plant is not the day you harvest. There's a lot of time that goes in between when you meet a client or when you meet a realtor partner or another referral partner and when you actually are able to harvest the plant or harvest some sort of revenue from that relationship. So you might meet a client today who doesn't fund for a year or two, or you might meet a referral partner who you hit it off with, but they don't have any business that they can send you for 6 months to a year. That doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong. It just means you need to continue nurturing that relationship. So, in the case of a farm, you're watering, you're weeding, you're applying nutrients. You have to do this with your relationships as well. You need to follow up with these people, have your Friday email, have your weekly call, your bi-weekly call, whatever you set it to. With your clients, at least have VIP club turned on so they're hearing from you once a month, if not more, and have that social media presence so you're popping up and reminding them that you're there. Everything you put into that relationship might be fruitless, but it might lead to something that you can harvest down the line. So you need to continue putting the effort in. And if you leave it and don't look after it, it's going to be the same thing as it would be in a garden or a farm. It'll be overcome with weeds. Nothing will ever come of it. Just life and nature will take it back. It'll go to shit. Similarly, not everything you plant works out. I was terrible at growing peppers. I was terrible at growing certain flowers. I planted tens of thousands of dollars of dahlia tubers that I thought, I'll take some of them out of the ground and then other ones all overwinter. Well, a harsh winter killed everything. I lost all of that. Things don't always work out the way you plan it to be. That doesn't mean that you stop doing those strategies or those tactics. There's going to be relationships where you meet with people and you say, I thought that was going to go somewhere and it fizzles out. Or you have a client you think is a slam dunk and then their brother in law gets their license and they decide to just go with them. These kinds of things happen. Everything doesn't always work out. And it doesn't mean it's that you're doing the wrong thing. It just sometimes means that you need to put more input. I'll give you a good example of this is when I was growing flowers, I spent $7,000 putting up these two little hoop houses that protected my crops from harsh weather and gave them a little bit of a warming period. I was trying a no-till strategy, so I didn't till the ground before. I just kind of covered it in tarps, killed off everything underneath, and then I planted directly in there. And so I planted this all out with seedlings that I had cultivated in my basement. They were beautiful. I had like simulated weather conditions in there, so they were like strong and could withstand wind. I got them all planted, perfectly spaced rows. Like it was hours of work. And over the next couple of days, every time I went to the plot, they were cut right off at the bottom. And I was like, what the hell? Is someone going through with a pair of scissors? Like, what the fuck is happening here? I'm losing all my seedlings. I don't have anything to replace it. It was actually just like my strategy to prep the ground was good from like an ecology perspective of having living organisms and everything from a soil quality perspective. But I had also created the perfect habitat for a certain type of pest called a cutworm to thrive. And essentially, what a cutworm does is it goes under the soil surface, and at night it just comes up, cuts the plant, eats that little bit, leaves the rest to die and rot on the ground, and goes back underground. So, like basically, Satan's plant reincarnated for a farmer. But this killed my whole tunnel of flowers. There was nothing I could do for it. I reached out to other farmers, I reached out to other people, and they just said, you just have to really heavily till that area going into the next season to prevent that from happening. And obviously, I was too far into the season to do that. So that whole plot just ended up being a loss for me. In our business, there's certain things that go sideways. Deals get blown up, things happen where deals fall through. The beauty thing for us is we don't have to worry about a next season coming. We have a next day that we can start, we can pick back up, brush ourselves off, and you just have to reset your mindset and decide, okay, well, how am I going to prepare for this better? Our cycle is so quick that we can wipe the windshield, restart the next day with a blank slate, take the strategies, take the pain points, take everything that went wrong, tweak it, and go back into the next day and set ourselves up for success that way. That's a huge difference between these two industries, and one that I'm hugely grateful for because it allows us to come back and iterate so much quicker. Like, I can tell you from January how I did things to how I do things today, radically different. We're always evolving and improving the process, and we don't have to wait for whole seasons. We don't have to wait for another fall and winter, a long period to just test a little strategy. We can constantly be testing, iterating, and improving in the cycle. To that point, when you're testing and you're starting a new strategy, things are going to fail. So something's going to go wrong where you work for an hour on a podcast, you work for an hour on a YouTube video, or 2 hours if you're editing yourself, probably more. Nikki does the editing, so I have no idea how long it takes. But then, it gets 5 views and you're like, holy shit, this sucks. And that's the same thing in the mortgage space. I remember my first couple discovery calls, my first few realtor meetings, I absolutely bombed them. They were terrible. But going back and every time just trying to get 1% better, now my calls are like not amazing. My calls are pretty good. My realtor meetings, I find that when I have them, I lock them in. It's just like second nature now. I'm good at the process, and there's still tons of room for improvement. I don't think this is an industry you can ever get stagnant and stop learning and stop improving, but you eventually get to a point that's good. And same with farming. Like, my first couple plantings, my yields were terrible. My harvests were terrible. I was so slow. I remember my first delivery, I actually had to have Levia stay home from work and help me harvest because I was hours behind, and it was just fucking awful. And I ended up like calculating what I made, and it was like $2.50 per hour, not even factoring in her labor, and just total shit show. So over time, I got more efficient and I could bang out like a huge harvest and delivery in the same day, covering like hundreds of dollars of product, which is pretty good for a farm. But that was only in time. And same within the mortgage industry. Like, now, what I can do in terms of underwriting, client care, all of that stuff used to take hours. You get faster and faster, and your process gets better and better, but you have to allow yourself the patience to do the reps. And if there's things you're putting off, you're just going to delay the growth there. So force yourself to do those uncomfortable things, force yourself to slow down to get fast, because when you prioritize doing those painful things, you will get better, and that will ultimately boost your overall performance. Next big takeaway for me was, if you have the same offering as everyone else, you're going to lose. So when I started with microgreens, super niche product. You can grow them in 10 days and harvest every 10 days. So it's a super quick product cycle. It's a niche offering for restaurants, and it was a really niche offering when I first brought it to farmers markets, and people loved it. I was getting tons of sales. My weekly farmer markets were going really well, but observation, copying, this is all part of any business. So other farmers would see this, realize how easy it was to do, and they added microgreens to their offering. A month later, there was 3 people offering it. All of a sudden, I wasn't this unique booth anymore, and my sales suffered as a result of it. In that space, what I eventually did is I added some flowers and other things, so it was like visually more attractive, drew people in. I also partnered with a mushroom farmer so that we had some complementary products there, and just kind of became an ultra niche booth. The same thing applies to the mortgage space when you're just competing on things like a rate alone. And we talk about this in other episodes. I'm not going to go too deep on that, but you need to set yourself up and distinguish yourself in a way that says, okay, I'm not just the best rate guy. Yes, rate is important, but I'm going to provide value in these other 3 core areas, and define yourself by that. And if you see that a lot of other people start defining yourself by the same, so let's say everyone and their brother is now doing a budget, your budget isn't the thing you highlight as standing out. It's just something that becomes part of your offerings. It's kind of your base. But then you have to have your other pieces that highlight what makes you unique and stand out from the competitors in the market space, be it the individual banks or other brokers who are competing in your market. The point here is to be willing to evolve and adapt. If your monthly deal flow is suffering, take a look at yourself and take a look at what else is in your market. And maybe you've gotten kind of stagnant and it's time to kind of refresh and reinvigorate your offering for your clients. Okay, so there's a season for everything. This is the same in farming as there is in mortgages. There's a season to plant, there's a season to harvest, there's a season to rest. And I think a lot of us forget the last piece there, that there is a season to rest. And we constantly try to go, 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 push through things. And by the end of the spring, summer market, everyone's kind of burnt out and grumpy. And it sets themselves up for failure when the fall kind of rush comes in because you're like, I don't even feel like doing a mortgage right now. Whereas if you give yourself that weekend where you shut your phone off, give yourself a couple days here and there and allow yourself to just kind of restore your body and your mind, it will pay dividends for your business. You'll come back with some of those fresh ideas to help you stand out, and you'll come back wanting to actually do the work. And I think that's the key piece that separates people. If you look at like top performers out there, like Jim Terlucas right now, he's posting pictures from Greece. Like that guy absolutely crushes it in the mortgage space, but he's still taking time to take a vacation. And sure, probably has his team working on things in the background, but that's great. That's exactly how you should do things so that you have the opportunities to give your body and your mind time to restore and grow. Okay, last piece here is you reap what you sow. Small problems become big problems. I had an issue with my water, and at first I was just carting water in with my van. I had like a water refill thing in one of those giant like IBC totes, and this worked for a bit, but there wasn't a lot of rain that summer, and that plot significantly suffered. The yields were shit. Everything just sucked because my water supply was crap. I had arranged a relationship that fell through and we didn't have access, and I didn't have the budget to put a well or any other source there. So I was left with all of these like kind of duct tape solutions to things that blew up in my face. This could have been prevented by having better contracts, better foresight, and just like not ignoring those little things. So this small problem became a huge issue in time. And the same thing goes in your mortgage business. Certain things in your discovery call, in your document collection, in your lead generation that might seem trivial and might seem like, oh, it's okay. I missed that question. It's fine. I didn't bring this thing up with the client. This comes back to bite you in the butt later. And these are things that you should recognize when you have a small problem, identify it, and then just deal with it. It's so much quicker to just deal with it and put a solution in place. Even if it's not the best solution, put something in place and then make a note, pin it on your wall if you have to, and circle back to come back to it with a better strategy. Because if you don't, those small problems compound, and it can be the kind of thing that when you least expect it will totally derail you. So a minor flaw today that might cost a couple $100s to deal with will turn into something that costs thousands to deal with later and totally fucks up your mindset and your stride. So just a quick recap, take time to allow things to cultivate. Don't stop nourishing things. Eventually, there will be a time to harvest and you can reap what you sow there. Don't give up after the first failure. A lot of things are going to go wrong. Recognize that we do have a quick cycle and you can refresh your ideas, refresh your approach, and revisit things quite quickly. Establish ways to stand out from other offerings in the marketplace. There's so many unique value adds as brokers and agents that we can bring to the table. There's no reason that we should all look the same. Recognize that there's a season to everything and give yourself that time to rest. And lastly, don't ignore the small problems because they'll come to bite you in the ass. So both farming and mortgages, I've loved elements and hated elements of both. I'm happy now to have the income of a mortgage broker and be able to grow plants for fun. I love being in nature and I love being surrounded by plants, and that's still something I'm passionate about. But I don't have to rely on it anymore. I do have to rely on my mortgage business though. And this is something that I'm always looking for ways to improve it and to figure out how I can get the most out of my business. So if there's things that you do in your business that we don't touch on in the podcast, please draw our attention to them. This ultimately is a passion project. We do this podcast. It, like a farm, loses money, but it allows us to really develop ideas that we then share with the community at large. So if there's things you're like, hey, I do this and it's fantastic for my business, please share it with us because that's how we will all grow and thrive. I wholeheartedly believe that building a better mortgage brokering industry is better for brokers across the board. The more that we can do to stand out as an industry as a whole is going to be better for everyone in the end. As they say, a rising tide lifts all ships, and I truly believe that. So I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.